Taking you to the White House, let's listen in to Joe Biden.
Best possible terms. Low tariffs, few barriers of trade, and the highest possible imports allowed. In the United States, we call this permanent normal trade relations, PNTR, but it's the same thing. Revoking PNTR for Russia is going to make it harder for Russia to do business with the United States, and doing it in unison with other nations to make up half of the global economy will be another crushing blow to the Russian economy. It's already suffering very badly from our sanctions. And I want to thank Speaker Pelosi, Leader McCarthy, Leaders Schumer and McConnell, and Senators Wyden and Crapo, Representatives Neal and Brady, for their bipartisan leadership on this in the Congress. I would like to offer a special thanks to Speaker Pelosi, who's been a strong advocate for revoking PNTR and who agreed to hold off on that in the House until I could line up all of our key allies to keep us in complete unison. Unity among our allies is critically important, as you all know, from my perspective at least. Many issues divide us in Washington, but standing for democracy in Ukraine, pushing Russia's aggression, should not be one of those issues. The free world is coming together to confront Putin. Our two parties here at home are leading the way. And with that bipartisan cooperation, I'm looking forward to signing into law the bill revoking PNTR, which is, again, most people think of it as most favored nation status. We're also taking a further step of banning imports of goods from several signature sectors of the Russian economy, including seafoods, vodka, and diamonds. And we're going to continue to squeeze Putin. The G7 will seek to deny Russia the ability to borrow from leading multinational institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Putin is an aggressor. He is the aggressor, and Putin must pay the price. He cannot pursue a war that threatens the very foundations, which he's doing, the very foundations of international peace and stability, and then ask for financial help from the international community. The G7 is also stepping up pressure on corrupt Russian billionaires. We're adding new names to the list of oligarchs and their families that we're targeting. And we're increasing coordination among the G7 countries to target and capture their ill-begotten gains. They support Putin. They steal from the Russian people, and they seek to hide their money in our countries. They're part of that kleptocracy that exists in Moscow, and they must share in the pain of these sanctions. And while we're going after these their super yachts and their vacation homes and worth hundreds of millions of dollars, we're also going to make it harder for them to buy high-end products manufactured in our country. We're banning the export of luxury goods to Russia. They're also the latest steps we're taking, but they're not the last steps we're going to take. And as I said, at the beginning of all these steps, we're going to hit Putin harder because the United States and our closest allies and partners are acting in unison. And the totality of our sanctions and export controls is crushing the Russian economy. The ruble has lost more than half its value. They tell me it takes about 200 rubles to equal $1 these days. Moscow Stock Exchange has been closed for 2 weeks because they know the moment it opens, it will probably collapse. Credit rating agencies has downgraded Russia's government to junk status, its economy to junk status. The list of businesses, international corporations leaving Russia is growing by the day. We're also continuing to close corporations with allies and partners to make sure that the close cooperation we continue to have, the Ukrainian people are able to defend their own nation. The United States has sent more than $1 billion in security assistance to Ukraine over the last year, including anti-armor and anti-air capabilities, taking out tanks and planes and helicopters, with new shipments arriving every day. We, the United States, are also facilitating significant shipments of security assistance from our allies and partners to Ukraine. And the humanitarian front, we're working closely with the UN and humanitarian organizations to support the people of Ukraine who have been displaced by the violence in Ukraine. We're providing tens of thousands of tons of human supplies, humanitarian supplies, food, water, medicines, coming via truck and train every single day. Yesterday in Poland, Vice President Harris announced an additional $53 million in additional humanitarian support to Ukraine. That brings the total humanitarian assistance to $107 million in just 2 weeks. We've joined this effort with more than 30 other countries who are providing hundreds of millions more. And last night, to their great credit, the Congress passed a bipartisan spending bill that included an additional $13.6 billion in new assistance to the Ukrainian people. And I look forward to signing that immediately. I also want to be clear, though. We will make sure Ukraine has weapons to defend against an invading Russian force. We will send money and food and aid to save the Ukrainian people. And I will welcome Ukrainian refugees. We should welcome them here with open arms if they need access. And we're going to provide more support for Ukraine. We're going to continue to stand together with our allies in Europe and send unmistakable message. We'll defend every single inch of NATO territory with the full might of the united and galvanized NATO. We will not fight a war against Russia in Ukraine. Direct confrontation between NATO and Russia is World War III, something we must strive to prevent. But we already know Putin's war against Ukraine will never be a victory. He hoped to dominate Ukraine without a fight. He failed. He hoped to fracture European resolve. He failed. He hoped to weaken the transatlantic alliance. He failed. He hoped to split apart American democracies in terms of our positions. He failed. The American people are united. The world is united. And we stand with the people of Ukraine. We will not let autocrats and would-be emperors dictate the direction of the world. Democracies are rising to meet this moment, rallying the world to the side of peace and the side of security. We're showing our strength, and we will not falter. God bless all of you. God bless Ukraine, and God bless our troops.
Your White House has said that Russia may use chemical weapons or create a false flag operation to use them. What evidence have you seen showing that? And would the U.S. have a military response if Putin does launch a chemical weapons attack?
I'm not going to speak about the intelligence, but Russia would pay a severe price if they use chemical weapons.
Mr. President,
Extending the federal gas tax?
will this make Putin stop his war?
The world is united. We will not let autocrats dictate to the world. The warning there from the US President Joe Biden, also vowing his words that we will not falter as he went through the list as he sees it of objectives which the US and its allies have achieved in sanctioning Russia, as well as the list as he sees it of failures that the Russians have failed to achieve through the conflict in Ukraine. Let's bring in Kimberly Halcott. She's at the White House listening into that. Kimberly, very clear their message from the US president that they are making progress through these sanctions. That seems to be the message which the US president is trying to get out there, is that they are making progress against the Russian offensive.
Yeah, the U.S. president certainly is delivering that message. You have to remember that this is a message of the West that is in conflict with Russia. So certainly it is going to have bias. And we have to keep that in mind, that this is U.S. rhetoric in contrast with Russian rhetoric. Having said that, and I should point out, the reason I've got my ear plugged right now is that I've got Marine One in the background, and it is very loud. In fact, it was very loud throughout much of the president's speech, so it was difficult to hear. But what I can tell you, and what we did know about this, is that it was anticipated, and certainly this is the latest in a series of actions by the U.S. president in coordination with his partners and allies to further inflict harsh punishment on Vladimir Putin and the Russian economy in order
Sorry, Kimberly,
to
just to clarify,
punish him
you're talking
for
about the permanent normal trade relations, a repealing of that status.
Yes, that's what I was talking about.
Yes, go on, just to clarify for viewers.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why you interjected there, but the point I was trying to make was this is the latest in a series of punishing actions, punitive actions, by the U.S. president in coordination with partners and allies, because he did mention in coordination with other nations, including Canada, as well as others, in order to inflict damage on the Russian economy. And in other words, the trading relationship, which would have a financial impact. And so that is what this latest action is about. And the U.S. president is making that announcement. And of course, this is the latest in a number of serious actions. This would remove the favored trading status that Russia enjoyed up to this point. And this would impact a number of Russian goods, vodka, for example. So this is, again, an announcement that was anticipated and one that the U.S. president has done in coordination with the West as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
All right, thanks so much, Kimberly. I didn't mean to throw you off. Just wanted to clarify, since we hadn't referenced it yet, just to make sure that viewers knew that we were talking about the repealing of the permanent normal trade relations status, which was, of course, the reason, ostensibly, that the U.S. president had appeared to give us this talk or this update. Let's continue this now. We're delighted to have with us here on set Marwan Bishara. He's Al Jazeera's senior political analyst. So looking through the points which were being made by the U.S. president there, and looking at the statements made just shortly before that in Versailles, a coordination of messaging, right? That, you know, we are having real impact on the Russians, and the effort to isolate Russia will continue.
So you had the American president basically echoing the French president, whose country now leading the European Union for the next 6 months, emphasizing two tracks. The American president, which is the humanitarian track, helping Ukraine, the sanctions track, pressuring Russia. Both of them saying the sanctions are working, basically telling journalists and the public opinion, don't worry, we are at it. This will hurt Russia a lot. Let's remember two things. One, how formidable is the West's economic, corporate, industrial, technological arsenal that it's basically deploying against Russia. Let's also remember that Russia's economy is smaller than a medium-sized European economy like Italy. It's a small economy, and it could actually hurt, and we've heard some of the evidence. But on the track of the humanitarian, of course, it's very hard to prove, especially with the scenes that we see every day,
that the humanitarian effort is really helping the Ukrainians, right?
Come on, right? I mean, the country is imploding. But just, by the way, just to add one thing, the American president said nothing, and he's been saying nothing from the very beginning, on the diplomatic track. The French president, on the other hand, added the third dimension. They were humanitarian, sanction, and then the diplomatic, saying we will continue to isolate Russia, but we want to bring Russia into a diplomatic process.
So how do you read the divergence when it comes to emphasis on diplomacy at this point? Are you saying that there's more of an appetite to reach a quick diplomatic solution in Europe?
It's always been the case from day one. The Europeans always believed, until Putin basically punched them in the face,
that diplomacy could work.
By going in with the diplomacy. But they still insist that diplomacy should work because, by the way, the end of any war is to do business and to have peace. I mean, what are they, what's war for? So the idea is for the Europeans, who their feet is closer to the fire, is to say, look, there's a war going on. We need to end it. We need to have a diplomatic process, because the idea of the continuation of the war, seen from Washington, is basically less feverish, less harmful than for the neighboring European. The East Europeans are not just anxious, not just worried, they are scared. And the West Europeans are really solidifying themselves because they are worried about what Putin could do next.
But in addition to the three tracks that you mentioned, we also are hearing the same message being echoed in Washington, D.C. and in Versailles about acting in unison, acting together with allies. That the Russian attempt, as this is the Western narrative, the Russian attempt to divide Europe, to push NATO back, is actually backfiring.
Absolutely. Look, when Putin started basically saber rattling in East Ukraine, there was still a division between the Europeans and the Americans. But when he invaded, they mended fences. and NATO became much stronger, much more united, and the European Union became much more united, East and West. So basically, by invading Ukraine, Putin has delivered back NATO into life. NATO, the brain-dead NATO, is now back into life. Europeans saying we're going to coordinate among us and, of course, coordinate with NATO. And, of course, there are two things we've heard, Simon, just so our viewers recap what they've heard the last hour and a half or 2 hours. There's the immediate, the humanitarian, the sanctions, and so forth. But the Europeans give us a far more important picture. Beyond the immediate, there's the long term. Europe is going to look for independence and sovereignty. Europe...
Energy independence. And
energy independence and sovereignty. No, but also independence in general, they said. We will cooperate with the world, but we have to be stronger. We have to be stronger defense-wise. We have to be stronger economic-wise. We have to be independent...
in terms of energy.
In terms of energy. But also, long-term, de-invest from the Russian economy. That's probably the most important message I heard. That means it's not just about sanctions next. We heard about 330 companies, according to our own website, that already now are leaving or boycotting Ukraine, right? But the idea that we're going to punish Russians not only in the short term, we're going to de-invest from the Russian economy on the long term.
Complete disconnection. All right. Thanks so much, Marwan Bishara.